about the Office of Vocation Operations. My name is Bronwyn Corlett, Program Coordinator for Ministry Recruitment. I am pleased to introduce my guests today, Jennifer Jansen-Ball, Program Coordinator for Ministry Vocation, and Karen Medland, Office of Vocation Minister for Northern Spirit, Living Skies, and Prairie to Pine Regional Councils. Welcome. A reminder that this information applies to all communities of faith across the country for the whole OV, nationwide. So our topic today is what to do or what you should know if your community of faith is considering becoming a Supervised Ministry Experience site. So, or a SME, as it is often referred to. So if you are a community of faith in search of a new minister, if you have a vacancy, you could become a Supervised Ministry Experience site. So what should you know and what should you consider?
Hi, Bronwyn. I think some of the pieces to consider are that when students, candidates are looking for somewhere to complete their supervised ministry experience, that they are looking at your profile with their learning goals in mind. And so what they're really looking for is a match to their learning goals for with a site profile. And I mean, most of those goals are fairly broad and would certainly encompass lots of the things that a congregation are looking for. But when the student is then making their application to you to have that appointment, be an SME, they are also going to be there's going to be a lot of complexity in that application because of those needs around their learning goals. So they are always coming in first and foremost with their learning goals at the front of their work.
Okay, so what type of minister would you get when if you become a Supervised Ministry Experience site?
So the students would be from one of our three different education programs. They will either be from our designated lay ministry stream, or they will be from an integrated program such as St. Andrews or Atlantic School of Theology's 5-year program, or they will have already completed 3 years of education and have their Master of Divinity and will be doing their SME at the end of their studies, and they will have come through what most people would see as more kind of a traditional school program, in that you finish school and then you come in to do your SME.
Okay, so they'll have already completed their well, I guess it depends which program, most of their educational training, some of their educational training. So the appointments are usually, they're not full-time?
So we recommend that students are a minimum of half-time, and we try to encourage students to stay below 3/4 time. This allows, particularly for the integrated programs and for the DLM program, it allows for the student to have time to do their studies. This is the piece that, first and foremost, they're students, they're not ministers yet. They're first and foremost students. Right. And so they have studies they have to complete while they're also ministering to the community of faith. So we recommend that they try not, that they don't go above 3/4 time in their placement for their SME. This means that then they can adjust their hours in conversation with the pastoral charge around how they're going to organize their hours so that they can go to learning circles, complete papers, and if in the Atlantic program, they can get to their 6 weeks residency in Halifax. And that's when I said earlier that it's a little more complex than, say, maybe a regular appointment, is that there's some negotiation needs to be done around timeframes, because we don't expect students, we don't expect anybody to use all of their vacation time or any of their vacation time to go to their required school programming. So that's one of the pieces congregations have to take into account when they're negotiating the appointment forms with these candidates, is that the student is entitled to have their vacation, right, just like any other minister, and that is not to be used to go to Halifax or come to a learning circle at St. Andrews in Saskatoon, that they need that time to refresh themselves. I mean, if you could only imagine working full-time, going to school as well, like how exhausted a candidate would be.
Right. So these are candidates that have had a successful readiness for a supervised ministry experience interview. So they're
Yes.
fairly far along, but these are not ministers yet. And they are entitled to all their vacation time of a minister. But I'm hearing that some will need more time to complete their schooling. They'll need some time away from the congregation. And the students don't always get to choose those times, right? It's the schools that set those times, those learning circles.
That's
For
right.
that negotiation part, yeah.
Yeah. So the students don't have an option about when they're going to be away from the ministry site.
Right.
The schools do set that timing.
Yeah.
Ideally, students would know enough in advance to be able to have those conversations with the community of faith and set up, pastoral care and pulpit supply and things like that.
Right.
The other thing just to note about the time away is that, part of any appointment is the 3 weeks of continuing education or study leave. That's a foundational kind of part of the appointment, but that can be negotiated to be for a longer period of time, as Karen was saying. So if students need to go to Halifax for 6 weeks, then that becomes part of the negotiation around the appointment.
Okay, so there's a little complexity, a little extra negotiation needed. Is there funding available for students if you hire a student?
For sure. There's funding available for communities of faith. There's certain parameters that you would need to meet as a community of faith, but there is funding available for moving costs. So if you find a candidate whose learning goals and the needs of your ministry site are a great match, but they live really far away, there's funding for up to $5,000 to cover the moving costs. And there's also funding grant available to move a student up to more hours. So say you're a pastoral charge, you could afford quarter time, but students need a half-time ministry site. There'd be funding available to increase the hours to half-time or to move from half-time to three-quarter time. So there's some options there, and the funding would apply for each year that the student is in an appointment there. So you don't have to reapply. You just apply once for, say, the 2 years or 3 years that a student would need to be in their SME site.
Terrific. So if a community of faith is seriously considering becoming a supervised ministry experience site, who should they talk to? Who should they get more details from?
So they, of course, could talk to their Office of Vocation minister. That's always a great place to start. And pastoral relations ministers are also well-versed in, connecting congregations around the SME work. Their pastoral charge liaison, who does the pastoral relations work with them, should also be able to give them at least some starting guidance. But yeah, there's lots of resources of people, and of course.
All right, so what are the expectations of the community of faith when they become a SME site?
So a community of faith, when they become a SME site, need to be able to support the student in their learning. And one of the ways they do that is they have to create a lay supervision team, which we call inside the Office of Vocation an LST. So lay supervision team are a group of people who are a good representation of the congregation around gender, age, length of time in the congregation, and they are there to work with the student during their 2 years to help them reflect on and achieve their learning goals. And I think it's important to remind congregations when they're thinking about this that the LST does not in any way replace or double up on the work of the Ministry and Personnel Committee. It's important for a congregation that is considering being an SME site to have a good functioning Ministry and Personnel Committee, so that they can deal with the work that they would deal with any minister, and that the LST can really focus on learning goals and reflection around the learning process. And so that means that we actually have restrictions on who can be in the LST. So we don't allow chairs of boards, treasurers, members of the Ministry and Personnel Committee to be on LSTs, because we don't want that double evaluation role going on. or to jeopardize the relationship, say, that the student has to have with the chair of the board. You know, it's hard to have that relationship with chair of the board and then also be in that supervisory reflective piece as an LST member. So we try to make sure that those are clear boundaries. There's also an education supervisor who is not the pastoral charge supervisor. Again, two very different roles happening. And so the education supervisor is appointed by the candidacy board, often through the Office of Vocation minister. And so between the student, the LST, and the supervisor, they create with the congregation a learning covenant, which is a covenant that holds them in the special relationship of being a learning site, being a community that are keen and excited to learn together with a student, and of course the supervision role of the learning supervisor.
I think there's a couple other things just related to that this is good for communities of faith to know. So part of the time that the student needs in order to work on their learning goals, but also have those kind of reflective and evaluative conversations, is that the student does need time each month to meet with the lay supervision team and with their education supervisor. And so that's what some of their time will be going towards as well. And we've already mentioned, of course, that the student might need to be away from the community of faith certain times during the year if they're finishing their studies, then there'll be a way to do some of that and maybe doing some coursework as they're in the community of faith as well.
I think one of the, I just wanted to ask one of the joys of this is that communities start to learn to build capacity around learning themselves. And that's a really crucial part of the whole experience of being a supervised ministry education site, is that actually congregations learn more about themselves. They learn how to build capacity into their communities, which makes them stronger communities of faith as they face, life in the church in the 21st century.
That's right. And it's important, it's an important ministry actually for the community of faith in raising up our future ministry personnel and current.
Well, exactly. They get to kind of shape the future of the church. It's often a big sales line I give congregations when they're phoning me up and asking me. I say, you know what? You're actually getting to shape the future of the church. This is an exciting ministry in itself. This is a ministry to the church. This is it's not just another appointment. This is a ministry to the wider church you're offering, and that is very exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you for all the information. Is there anything else we should know about SMEs at this point? Supervised Ministry Experience?
Just to say, there are lots of great candidates out there looking for somewhere to go to learn, who are looking to do exciting things, who bring energy to ministry that maybe you might not see in a minister who's got 20 years of experience. They might be bringing something new and exciting into your community. And that, again, is a wonderful gift both to the community of faith and to the wider church in the long term.
Well, thank you so much. I think that's it. Thank you for joining us on How to OV and learn about Supervised Ministry Experience sites.
Thanks, Bronwyn.
God bless everyone.